Good evening, dear viewers. Welcome back to the review program. Diplomacy is the art and science of maintaining peaceful relationships between nations, groups, or individuals. Often, diplomacy refers to representatives of different groups discussing such issues as conflict, trade, the environment, technology, or maintaining security. In this episode, we will discuss diplomatic norms and how those norms adapt to a changing world. Before we proceed with our topic, let's define diplomacy and its aspects. The term diplomacy is derived via French from the ancient Greek diploma, composed of diplo, meaning folded in two, and the suffix ma, meaning an object. The folded document conferred a privilege, often a permit to travel, and the term came to denote a document through which princes granted such favors. Later, it applied to all solemn documents issued by chancelleries, especially those containing agreements between sovereigns. Diplomacy later became identified with international relations and the direct tie to document lapses. Diplomacy is conducted by diplomats. All the functions of diplomacy are performed by them. The functions of diplomacy include the state's representation and negotiation, the gathering of information, and the promotion of peaceful ties between nations. There are three types of diplomacy: public diplomacy, economic diplomacy, and cultural diplomacy. Public diplomacy is a type of diplomacy that emphasizes interacting with foreign citizens in order to develop bonds and influence the opinion of the public. Economic diplomacy is using the entire spectrum of a state's economic resources to advance its national interests. Cultural diplomacy is the sharing of ideas, art, data, and information and other elements of culture among nations and their inhabitants in order to improve mutual understanding. Diplomacy is often confused with foreign policy, but the terms are not synonyms. Diplomacy is the chief instrument of foreign policy, which is set by political leaders, though diplomats may advise them. Foreign policy establishes goals, prescribes strategies, and sets the broad tactics to be used in their accomplishment. So why diplomacy is important for international relations? States use diplomacy to establish their positions in international relations through negotiations and dialogue. States aimed at identifying shared interests as well as points of contention. Most often in international relations, states come to an agreement after discussions and portray the behaviors and principles that are deemed acceptable and advantageous for both parties. This works through soft power due to the fact that these tactics are not forcibly imposed. Secondly, diplomacy can be used to obtain intelligence. The purpose of this information is to determine and assess the state's foreign policy objectives. Moreover, diplomacy can be used to increase political, economic, and cultural harmony. This collaboration offers adequate ways for their state's national interests to be attained. Finally, diplomacy is employed to uphold international law, which influences national policies about behavior and international cooperation. Guidelines are provided by legislation for preserving jurisdictions over diplomatic missions, treaty negotiations, and government-to-government exchanges. Due to its strategic location at the intersection of major trade and transport routes, Uzbekistan is recognized as a valuable participant in international relations. This position makes the country well-suited for regional and global cooperation, trade and economic integration. The growing need for diversified alternative energy corridors and safe transport routes highlights the significance of Uzbekistan's infrastructure and its potential to connect Central Asia with global markets. As a result, this situation has generated new interest and contacts from various international organizations in Uzbekistan. This trend peaked in 2023. Uzbekistan continues its policy of openness by engaging in dialogues with countries around the world and actively participating in international organizations and initiatives. Uzbekistan has played a cooperative and constructive role by hosting various international conferences, promoting dialogue and strengthening mutual understanding between nations. This proactive diplomacy has enhanced Tashkent's reputation as a reliable and influential partner in the region and beyond. Diplomacy as the practice of managing international relations has been a fundamental aspect of human interaction for centuries. However, in the rapidly evolving landscape of the 21st century, diplomacy is undergoing significant transformations to meet the challenges and opportunities presented by the interconnected and complex world. One of the most notable changes in contemporary diplomacy is the rise of digital diplomacy. In an era dominated by technology and social media, diplomats are leveraging digital platforms to engage with global audiences, shape public opinion, and promote their nation's interests. Digital diplomacy enables diplomats to communicate directly with citizens, bypassing traditional gatekeepers and intermediaries, and fostering greater transparency and accessibility. Dear viewers, our today's guest Sherzod Arapov. He is the Doctor of Philosophy in Political Science. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for coming and joining us today. Can you tell us how long you've been working in this field and what are the most important things that you have learned?
Well, actually, right after I graduated from the master's program at the University of Political and Diplomacy, I decided to continue research and teaching activity at my alma mater, the UET. So it means actually from 2010 I'm engaged in the research of public diplomacy and soft power issues, in particular digital diplomacy. Actually, I had field research in Japan, trying to analyze on a comparative basis the experience of Japan and the United States. Then, after coming back to my home country, I decided to continue my research on this subject area, and my PhD is dedicated to this topic of digital diplomacy.
Great. I remember one of your articles you've been writing about digital diplomacy. Let's talk about digital diplomacy in today's globalized world when we have different tools such as Zoom and etc., etc. Do you think there will be a need for the development of face-to-face diplomacy?
Traditional diplomacy is always in there. It's topical. Actually, traditional diplomacy and new forms and methods of diplomacy, they are complementary to each other. In other words, we still have, as you mentioned, face-to-face meetings, negotiations behind closed doors, secret activity of diplomats. Of course, it's all important. At the same time, with the wide penetration of high technologies, information and communication technologies into the lives of people, landscape of diplomacy reshaped notably. What we see is now diplomats are actually harnessing the potential of digital platforms to better communicate with a global audience, shape public opinion, and promote their national interests using the potential of social media and other possible tools which are pretty effective in our days.
So we're talking about the tools that are help to develop, let's say, connections among countries. Let's talk about artificial intelligence. Now we can see artificial intelligence in almost in all aspects in different sectors. What about diplomacy? Does it already exist in diplomacy as well?
Of course, take for example digital diplomacy. Digital diplomacy involves artificial intelligence, its potential, because basically you deal with data analysis, big data analysis that is very hardly exposed to analysis by human factor, because daily basis we consume tons of information, but due to using special softwares which are integrated to official websites or social media pages of Ministry of Foreign Affairs and embassies, they easily enable diplomats to do this work instead of real people. So monitoring and discussions, analyzing, revealing potential risks, visualizing this all information. That's why it's one element how artificial intelligence can be reflected. On the other hand, probably you have heard about virtual embassies. Certain countries do practice this kind of activities, say in cases when you don't have your physical embassy or consulate general. This work is done through online. You just create your profile and the special bots. They receive information, answer to questions. There's some interactive type of work instead of human factor. And in the long run, countries with rich experience in digital diplomacy plan to appoint digital ambassadors even. Yes, virtual ambassadors.
Can you tell us about
It's for the time being, it's hard to imagine, but I believe it can be imagined like you don't have to physically be in the country of arrival. Actually, we have certain elements in our times, for example, using various types of video conferences or blogs, chats. It's similar thing, I guess. But a bit sophisticated form, probably, including some extra features which don't require participation of human being. We'll see in the
That's
future.
interesting, very much of interesting. You mentioned about the presence of human being in everything, like in diplomacy, in our today's globalized world, and I would say even changing world, considering current geopolitical things that are happening. What do you think those tensions are happening because of the failure of diplomacy among these countries, or it could be different reason for that?
There are a number of factors. I would say one of them is a lack of trust between countries and lack of trust in the activity of certain international organizations. Secondly, we need to better adapt existing resources, instruments of foreign policy to a changing world, because let's say traditional diplomacy is not effective anymore with its resources at its disposal. That's why we need to train new generation of diplomats that are capable in using the potential of social media analytical tools, their daily routine activity. Ministries of Foreign Affairs and diplomats need to rethink about their roles, about their functions from inward-looking, exclusive, secretive activity into, I would say, more outreaching, inclusive.
Can you share some examples of diplomatic approach that brought positive changes in Uzbekistan?
New Uzbekistan's commitment to developing peaceful relations or resolving long-standing conflicts has contributed to a more stable Central Asia. So far, we have strengthened our relations with neighboring countries, resolving a number of issues related to delimitation, water resources, right? And then, at the same time, engaged in regional initiatives for economic cooperation, culture exchange, and etc. Uzbekistan's strengthening bilateral and multilateral relations is based on the principle of multi-vector foreign policy. So at this stage, the relations we have developed with the Western world or Asian countries are important because countries of these regions, they're investing into the economy of Uzbekistan, be it automobile or green energy sectors. It's of course important. But I would like also highlight Uzbekistan's conference diplomacy initiative carried out by Uzbek leadership. So conference diplomacy carried out in parallel with developments, say in Afghanistan, turned Uzbekistan into the center of regional diplomacy. So since the withdrawal of US troops in Afghanistan and the Taliban came to power, strategic cities of Uzbekistan, Tashkent, Samarkand, hosted numerous meetings on Afghanistan, which again highlighted Uzbekistan as a center of diplomacy. Besides, we have numerous, we host numerous meetings for international organizations like Shanghai Cooperation Organization or Commonwealth of Independent States. These all, again, highlight Uzbekistan as a rising regional power, which is not, again, only, say, involved in domestic issues, domestic politics, but engaged in regional and global agendas. See, this is how, in case of Uzbekistan, our new philosophy, multi-vector foreign policy, gave its first results.
How do diplomats deal with the non-state actors in global affairs? Traditionally,
Diplomacy often involved solely nation states, but now we have a different picture. As I mentioned, diplomats are engaging with non-state actors like civil society institutions, non-governmental organizations, businesses, individuals, and etc. They have a notable role in terms of shaping global agenda. They have access to information, right? In that sense, as I earlier mentioned, the area which was exclusively prerogative of ministries of foreign affairs, ambassadors, envoys, should be again rethought in terms of functions and roles, because non-state actors, civil society institutions, they have their own area of expertise. For example, environmental issues, human rights issues, science, gender issues, they all have certain potential expertise. In order to elaborate appropriate risk assessment strategies or risk management strategies, you should involve into your activity policy recommendations and the potential of non-state actors as well.
How does social media impact diplomatic engagement and building trust? You've mentioned about the sample that happened in Twitter, so this is also, I think, connected to this question.
I'll give you some numbers to illustrate. Nowadays, 97% of all member countries of United Nations hold Twitter accounts, whereas 93% registered their accounts on Facebook. As you see, the landscape of diplomacy has changed enormously. Why? It is because of certain advantages of using digital platforms. First of all, in terms of building trust relationships, so you have opportunity, good chance to communicate directly with citizens, bypassing traditional gatekeepers, intermediaries, and this also fosters, at a certain extent, transparency and accessibility. Digital diplomacy is not about disseminating information. It's two-side road. Like it's important not just speak but listen. Mm-hmm. So, in that sense, one crucial aspect in this process is using social media by diplomatic actors to communicate at the grassroots level. Because sitting at the center, the ministries, you cannot hear local voices. But through communicating with target audience, those voices can be heard, right, at the local level. And then it's about dynamic landscape, mm-hmm. Which requires diplomats to be more creative, even in what way they communicate, it matters. Like they choose more dynamic and clear language in disseminating their message to ordinary people, right? And then I would mention it's about raising awareness by telling more about the ongoing reforms, politics. So these are the appropriate resources in our days to use in communicating with ordinary people.
So this is the end of our interview. Thank you for coming. This was a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Dear viewers, thank you for watching us and see you in our next episodes.